Amen. We are in Genesis chapter 25, and I wanted to do something that every once in a while I get confused when I'm reading the Bible. Actually, more than once in a while. I get confused when I'm reading the Bible, and I mix things up a little bit. I've heard the story, y'all have heard the story probably as long as you've been saved, about the birthright. And then there's also another, that's in chapter 25. We're going to read about the birthright. Then a little bit later on in chapter 27, we're going to read about the blessing. Now, I don't know about you, but the birthright and the blessing to me are like Elijah and Elisha. I can never figure out which one is what, okay? So the birthright, so I looked it up and I did some study on that. And I want to talk about what the birthright is, because we're going to study that in chapter 25. And then chapter 27, which is down the road a piece, we're going to talk about the blessing. What's the difference between a birthright and a blessing? And I thought that was, pretty interesting. It turns out that the birthright goes to the firstborn son. And what the birthright entails is the birthright entails two things. It's a double portion of Papa's inheritance, and it's also leadership of the family once Papa moves on. So we're going to study about Esau and Jacob, and we're going to study about the birthright and how Esau sold the birthright. The blessing is something totally different. The blessing happens in chapter 27, and in chapter 27, you've heard the story before. That's where Jacob deceives his blind father. The blessing was the father could bless his son any way he wanted. He had the opportunity and the choice to do what he wanted. He could bless one son more than another son. He didn't have to have any order. The blessing was up to the father's discretion. But once he blessed, he couldn't change his mind. Once he blessed, he couldn't alter it. And that's, if you want to look it up, it's in Deuteronomy 21:17, talks a lot about all this subject and gives you an idea there. So the difference between the blessing and the birthright. We will find out today that Jacob purchased the birthright. Esau sold it to him. Nobody was twisting his arm. He wasn't under great duress. He wasn't tricked. He wasn't deceived. He went into it with his eyes open, and he sold his birthright. He sold it for a mess of beans. And it's exactly, I mean, red lentils or beans, right? He sold it for a mess of beans. He sold a double portion of Daddy's inheritance, and he sold the right to rule over the family. When we get over to chapter 27, we're going to find out that Jacob deceived, or supplanted as his name is, Jacob fooled both his father and his brother, and in essence, if you will, stole the blessing. So that's the difference between the two. So that's a little parenthesis before we get there, but we're in chapter 25, starting in verse number 1. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bare him Zimran, and Jokshan, and Medan, and Midian, and Ishbak, and Shua. And Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were, and there's a list of names there, you can read them as well as I can. And the sons of Midian, and another list of names, all these were the children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. But unto the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts, and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived, eastward unto the east country. I want you to notice something. Verse number 1, Abraham took a wife. But if you look over into verse number 6, the sons of the concubines. There's a big difference between a wife and a concubine, okay? A concubine, according to my Strong's dictionary, is a paramour. It's not this, it's a girlfriend. If you, in a polite way, it's a girlfriend. A concubine. So this Keturah was a concubine. Some commentators that I have run into have said that, well, Keturah was taken as a concubine before Sarah died. There's a problem I have with that. You remember that Sarah and Abraham had someone living in the household with them by the name of Hagar? And it caused all kind of aggravation and grief. I find it highly unlikely that Sarah would tolerate or that Abraham would want a concubine in the family after their previous experience with Hagar. So commentators can comment all they want to, but it's not necessarily Bible. Okay? The other thing is some other commentators say, well, she was a Canaanite. They were living in the land of Canaan. She was a Canaanite. Where they get that from, I don't know, but they claim she was a Canaanite. I find that a little unlikely as well. You remember Abraham sent out his servant? We studied about this. He sent out his servant, and he sent his servant back to Haran to find a wife for his son Isaac. And what did he tell that servant when he went? Don't take my son with you, and he will not marry one of the local girls. He will not marry. He didn't want his son marrying a Canaanite. So I find it difficult to believe that Abraham would give this order to not intermarry with the Canaanites, and then he himself would marry a Canaanite. Quite frankly, we don't know where Keturah came from, okay? But she had 6 sons. Now you got to understand this, because there's some questions about this. 6 sons. How old was Abraham when Isaac was born? You remember? He was 100 years old. He was 100 years old when Isaac was born. That meant that Sarah was 90 when he was born. Sarah died at 127. We read that last week or so, a couple weeks ago. So if Sarah was 127 when she died, Abraham was 10 years older. He was 137. If he waited until after Sarah died to marry Keturah, he had 6 sons between the ages of 137 and the time he died. 6. Yeah, exactly. Even the impossible is possible with God. Yeah, amen. And you know, you remember the verse. I can't remember exactly where it's at. I've got it in my notes someplace. Hebrews 11, verses 11 and 12, he's talking to Sarah, and he says here, they say here, through faith also herself received strength to conceive seed. So speaking of Sarah, she got strength to conceive seed when she was 90 years old. And later on in that same verse it says, and him as good as dead. He was 100. God somehow revived or revitalized the youthfulness of both of them. And evidently it stuck with Abraham because he had 6 babies, 6 sons after Sarah passed on. That's something else. Maybe this is a fulfillment of prophecy. There's a verse in Genesis 17:4. Take a look over there while we're in the neighborhood. Genesis 17, verse 4. If I can find it. As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a what? A father of many nations. Maybe this marriage to Keturah after Sarah died was in fulfillment of this prophecy. You will be a father of many nations. Okay? Certainly he had fathered Ishmael, and there were a bunch that came out of Ishmael. And now he's married Keturah, and there's a bunch that will come out of Keturah. Interestingly enough, his wife Sarah had one, and one nation, even though that one nation would be comprised of 12 tribes, that one nation was one of the many nations that would come here. So, one of the sons is a fellow by the name of Midian. Midian is named, this is Keturah's sons. One of the sons is a fellow by the name of Midian, and Midian is found in a number of different places in the Bible, in the Old Testament. In Genesis 37, it talks about Midian was allied with the Ishmaelites. And in Numbers 25, they were allied with the Moabites. And in Judges chapter 6, they were aligned with the Amalekites. So we've got a bunch of these ites that all kind of come together. And if you read it anywhere in history, you'll find out that they kind of meandered and kind of merged together, and they kind of formed a new nation or a new group of people. And today we call them the Arabs. From Ishmael, from Midian, from Amalek, and from Moab. And they're all today, we would call them Arabs. Where were they at? They stayed around the general area of northern Saudi Arabia. One of the sons was a fellow by the name of Kedar, and that was northern Arabian area. Then they were also to the east of the Jordan River and to the west of the Jordan River. They were known as Edom, they were known as Esau, they were known as Arabs. Okay? Yep, yep, and there are a number of different places in the Old Testament, okay? Midian. So Midian was a son of our friend Abraham. It's interesting to note that the Bible makes it very specific. The inheritance went to Isaac, and Isaac alone. He had 6 other sons. The scriptures that we just read said he gave gifts to those other sons. We don't know what those gifts are. It doesn't say, but I would have to assume that if he had 6 other sons, that he would give them gifts to help them get set up. Remember, Abraham was a very, very wealthy man. He had all kind of properties and servants and herds and flocks and whatever. I believe he set up each one of his 6 sons to prosper, but the inheritance went to Isaac. There are those today, many, many today, will say, oh, no, 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 the inheritance went to the firstborn son, went to Ishmael. That's not true. That's not what the book says. We just read the book, and it says it goes to Isaac. So there are those that can argue their point as long as they want to, but it's not true. Go ahead.
I think that's probably what the argument the Arabs put in. Ishmael was the father of the Arabs.
Yeah.
So they claimed that because he was the first one, not the whole argument is they don't claim the same.
Right.
God actually gave.
Exactly, and that's why this chapter is so very important. We started off today by saying the difference between the birthright and the blessing. And we started off by saying today that the birthright we're going to talk about in this particular chapter, the birthright was sold. Our friend Esau sold it. He willingly gave up his birthright for a pot of beans. Now, they can't claim today, thousands of years later, oh, well, the birthright is really ours. It really belongs to Ishmael, the firstborn, because it was sold down the road by Esau. Esau sold it. He gave it up. By the way, Ishmael was not in the birthright. Even though he was the firstborn son, what does it say here? Verse number 5, and Abraham gave what? All that he had unto Ishmael. No, unto Isaac. He gave it all to Isaac. Ishmael was cut out of the will. Ishmael was kicked out of the family along with Hagar. They were set free and set to roam in the desert. They were pushed away. And God, by the way, backed that up. God told our friend Abraham, listen to what your wife Sarah has to tell you regarding this matter.
This all goes to the sovereignty of God. It's all in God's plan. No accident.
Exactly. God has his will, man has his will. And it seems like never the twain shall meet. Man consistently goes his own way, but God's way is a far better way. Verse number 7. And these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived 103 years. That's 175 years. He lived to be 175. He was 137 when he married Keturah, or when Sarah died, and he lives between 137 and 175, so that's a number of years that he lived on even further. And Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man full of years. Does it tell you that he's old? 3 different times, right? And was gathered to his people. What does this gathered to his people mean? His people. Well, his people could be considered to be Haran. His people could be considered to be Terah, his father. His people could be considered to be, you know, his own kinfolk, his own. We find out that Sarah, previous to this, was buried in a cave. Remember the cave of Machpelah? He was buried in a cave, and that cave and the land around that cave was purchased by Abraham from the sons of Heth. And so we find out that Sarah was buried in that cave. His beloved was buried in a cave. Not some rented piece of property, but his property. And when he died, he was buried in the cave. We'll read on a little further. His physical body was planted in that cave. But he went to be with his people. There's got to be a spiritual reference here, okay, which is a different thing than where your body is placed. Where your body is placed once you pass on don't matter. It's where you're going after that. Amen. Amen. He was gathered unto his people. Verse 9, and the sons of Isaac, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre. The field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahai Roi. So we find out that Ishmael and Isaac come together to bury their papa. I don't see where they come together anywhere after this. I mean, they're doing one of these things. To this day, Ishmael and Isaac are batting heads. I mean, look in the news, and you'll find out it's the Arabs and the Jews always in the news someplace. There may be something about, you know, U.S. politics or whatever going on, but somewhere in the news you'll find out something about Israel. We're to keep our eyes on Israel. Israel is God's focus. Israel is God's clock. Israel is what's important. So if you're looking at the news and you see something about Israel, let your ears perk up, because Israel is God's chosen. Verse number 12. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bore unto Abraham, and goes on and lists a whole bunch of fellows here, okay? I'm not even going to try to pronounce those names. Verse number 16. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns, by their castles, 12 princes according to their nation. They had towns, they had castles, and they were princes. These are not some everyday run-of-the-mill Joe, average Charlie, okay, that's out there. These were princes. They were leaders. The word princes here means to be a ruler. So they were in positions of power and authority. Did God bless Ishmael? Said he would. He certainly did. He certainly blessed him. Not only did he bless them with being prolific, but he also blessed them with giving them positions of authority, positions of power. Okay. Verse 17, these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people. And they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, which is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria, and he died in the presence of his brethren. Now we get to the meat of this chapter. Verse number 19. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac. You see, there's no mention of Ishmael here. We're talking about the spirit. The Bible's about spiritual things. So it's talking the spirit, the seed of the woman we studied way back in the book of Genesis chapter 3. The seed of the woman is progressing down the road. And we're finding that seed of the woman can't go multiple different places. It has one specific place to go. It goes down the line. It goes to Abraham. From Abraham, there's a split, there's a fork in the road. It can either go to Ishmael or it can go to Isaac. It doesn't go to Ishmael. It goes to Isaac. And so that's what we're talking about here. Verse 20. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Isaac marries late in life. He's, well, relatively late. Compared to today, he marries late. He marries when he's 40. They have no children. They have a period of time, 20 years it's going to turn out to be. He will be 60 when the twins are born. So for 20 years, there's no children from this union. Now, he's already been told that he's in the line of the seed of the woman, that he's going to have seed as many as the sands of the sea and the stars of the sky. They're married for 20 years. They got no kids. Does this sound familiar? What about Abraham and Sarah? Were they not married for a long time before they had children? They had children late in life, did they not? 90 and 100? That's late in life as far as having children is concerned. I mean, and so the story's almost repeating itself. He entreats, it says Isaac entreats for his wife. What's that mean? He prayed. He asked God for something specific. He prayed and he trusted in God. He entreated for his wife, and she did conceive. And boy, did she conceive. She had no children. We're going to find out now she's got 2 at the same time. So does God bless? Yeah. Abundantly beyond all we can ask for and think. And the children, verse 22, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. She's got a lot of turmoil running around inside of her. Remember, she's never been pregnant. She's right around her 50s or 60s, somewhere in that time frame. And she's having children for the first time. And she's got all this going on inside her. And she does what any good believer should do. She inquires of the Lord. She asks of the Lord, what's going on? Notice, she's the one that asks of the Lord, not him. Okay? Verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Let's read that again. The elder shall serve the younger. She asks of God what's going on. He tells her she's going to have twins. And there's conflict going on within the womb itself. And this conflict will actually, it will not go beyond the womb. It will come out of the womb, and it will go on till this day. That conflict is still going on. But she's asking him what's going on. She's having a problem, a difficulty, something she doesn't understand, and she takes it to the Lord in prayer. I don't see anywhere in here that Isaac's asking. God says there'll be two nations, two different personalities, two different ones within inside of you, and the younger shall be over the elder.
I have a question. I don't know if I have an answer. Since I wondered that. I wonder if this year the Lord told her what's going on. The Lord told her that the elder would serve the younger. I wonder if perhaps this is maybe the reason she favored Jacob over Esau. And why did Isaac not notice? It seems like Isaac didn't notice. Because he favored the other. And it seems to me that if he had known the same thing Rebecca did, he would have had the same feelings toward Jacob.
Well, there's two ways to look at that. I agree that it seems that that he would have thought the same way she did. But then again, I can't believe that she, as his loving wife, didn't tell him what God had told her. I mean, this is significant news, right? This is something that's not normal. Normally, the elder is the one that is having the birthright. Is that not true? Normally, it's the elder that succeeds. It's the elder that's given the double portion. It's the elder that's given the leadership. But God's telling her it's going to be the other way around. You see, his ways are not our ways. Or our ways are not his ways, however you want to look at that. I believe that he knew. I believe that she told him. I think she was a good wife. And I think she told him, and I believe that he chose to believe his own way. That's another way to look at it. We don't know. The Bible doesn't really tell us. Go ahead.
Maybe you know, when the deception was going on, maybe that's why that Isaac gave off to, when he was blessing, he thought he was blessing Esau, and was giving such a great blessing, maybe he was doing that because, you know, the revelation that Rebecca had given to him.
Yeah. Quite frankly, we don't know like you said, it's a question that we don't really know the answer to. But I tend to believe that she told him, that she let him know. I mean, she's very pregnant. She's got two inside of her. All this turmoil is going on. She asks of the Lord. The Lord tells her specifically that the elder will serve the younger. And I believe that this is news of such great importance to the family that she would tell her husband. He's supposed to be the leader of the family, right? I look at this whole scenario and also a little bit later on when in chapter 27 about the blessing. And I don't know about you, but I look at it and I see Isaac as kind of a weak character. I see him as not being the leader he should be. We're going to find out a little bit later on that God tells Isaac, I'm doing these things, I'm giving you this blessing because of Abraham. You know, you're not the same man your daddy was. You know, kind of a thing here. And that's kind of how I look at it. I look at him as kind of being a weak person. I believe he had his own idea of things. He was going to go along with the flow. Although I find that a little hard to believe, Brother Robert, because you see, Isaac was the one that was blessed over his elder brother, was he not? And there was a difference there in years of what, 16 years, something like that? And yet Isaac was the one that was blessed and not Ishmael. And I think somehow along the way that Isaac decided that he was of his own volition, knowing what Rebekah had told him. And it doesn't say Rebekah told him, so I'm just surmising here. But he decided to go his own way, go his own path. I'm going to bless who I'm going to bless. I'm going to give the birthright, you know, it's going to be Esau's, it's going to be his. I think that there was a conflict here in this family. This was what modern day psychologists would call a dysfunctional family, because we find out a little bit later on, jumping ahead, Isaac loves Esau. Rebekah loves Jacob. We got twins, same family, same mama, same papa. One loves one loves the other. There's partiality going on here. There's disharmony within this family. By the way, there was disharmony within Abraham and Sarah's family too, was there not? There was disharmony because of another son, a fellow by the name of Ishmael. So what goes around comes around.
It also means that, I mean, Rebecca did some things that were not very spiritual. It could be that she was the more spiritual of the two.
That's what I believe. That's what I believe. I believe that she was a more spiritual too.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't remember the preacher's name, but preacher preached one time a message on Rebecca. You know, I named Rebecca, if I remember the message right, it means a noose.
Okay.
A rope. You know, God knew that Isaac was going to need somebody
Yeah.
to lead in the right direction, and
Leash him in.
Rebecca was the one that God used to,
Yeah.
you know, even literally deceiving Isaac so that that seed would go in the right direction.
Amen.
Through the sovereignty of God, I mean, you know, God sent, Abraham sent a servant to a far country. It wasn't no accident that the Spirit of God
Exactly.
brought Rebecca
Yeah.
to the exact place at the exact time.
You know, there's different viewpoints about this whole chapter and this whole family situation here. There are those that say that Rebecca, going ahead to chapter 27 with the stealing of the blessing, that Rebecca was the one that fostered all this going on within the family, okay? She's the one that told Jacob, do what your mama tells you to do and go get the kids from the flock, and we're going to go ahead and fool Papa. Surely she knew that once Isaac found out, and he would find out, once Isaac found out, surely she knew that he would be upset. She risked losing his love to do what was right. You see, he was down the path that he was determined that he was going to go ahead and bless Esau, even though God told Rebekah, the elder shall serve the younger. He, I believe, was adamant in switching God's will around to his own way. And I believe that Rebekah loved him enough to know far better in the vernacular to tick him off, to make him upset, but to spare him from God's wrath from doing the wrong thing.
Well, you were going out as a pattern to bless the older to him. If you notice throughout the scripture,
Yes.
God reverses that.
He does.
He reverses it, he's the younger, all the way throughout the scripture. The pattern you get back here again, all through the scripture.
Yes, that's true. Let me find it here if I've got it someplace. Well, he gave, first of all, he gave it to Seth. The seed of the woman went through Seth. It didn't go through Cain, didn't go through any. So Seth was not the firstborn. We know that. He also gave it to Ishmael, or to Isaac over Ishmael. He gave it to David. Was David a firstborn son? No, not at all. There was a number. I had them written down somewhere in my notes. I can't even find it anywhere. But there were like 4 or 5 not the firstborn sons who were put into power, put into position of power. So, where were we at?
That's still in the spirit because of the law of Christ. And the younger, but that's a pattern.
It is a pattern. It definitely is a pattern. I lost my place.
Another thing was when the prodigal son he went astray. You read that real carefully. When he gave it to the younger, he gave the older one too. You read real carefully.
Yes.
There. He gave it to both of them, and both of them was lost. And the elder stayed at home, and he was a Pharisee. And
Yep. Let's go on in our studies here. We find out that these twin boys, they're born in chapter 25. They're born in verse number 25. The first came out red all over and hairy, like a hairy garment. Called his name Esau. The word Esau means red, and so he's kind of hairy and reddish colored. And then the other boy was plain. The Bible says it was plain. Verse number 27. The boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. We kind of look at that word plain, and some commentators have made a whole big thing about, well, he was just a plain man. He was just like a nobody. He was like a nothing. You know, this same word plain is used in Job 1:8, where it talks about Job as being a perfect man. The Hebrew word means a perfect or a mature man. He was one with his feet settled on the ground. Let's look at this. Esau was a hunter. right? Didn't we just read that? He was a cunning hunter. Now, I don't know about you, but I know a little bit about hunting. And I know that hunting means you go out in the field, and usually you sit under a tree for 100 years until something comes by, or whatever. Boom. Isaac inherited from whom? From Abraham. What did he inherit? It wasn't a bank account in Switzerland. It wasn't, he inherited the promise, but physically, what did he inherit? He inherited herds and flocks, right? He had lots and lots of herds and flocks. So Isaac had all these critters floating around. Did the family need a hunter? How hard would it be to go out and get meat? You'd go grab a kid from the flock and you got dinner. Which Rebecca did, yeah. What do you do? I like that. What do you do with a hunter? A hunter goes and maybe gets something, maybe doesn't. Matter of fact, if you're me, it's more like you doesn't than you does. And so, while Esau was this outdoorsy, he has this kind of vision in some people's eyes as being this outdoorsy, he-man, virile, macho kind of guy. As far as the family was concerned, he wasn't really necessary. Didn't need a hunter. They had meat on the hoof, aplenty. Jacob, on the other hand, was what? He was a stay-at-home fella. Learning the business, and he was a herdsman. What did the family need? Did they need a hunter or did they need a herdsman? They need a herdsman. If you will extrapolate just a little bit, Esau kind of went his own way and did his own thing. He was really kind of irresponsible. He was the Bible says over in 1 Peter, I think it is, talks about Esau, says he was a profane man. He was a wicked man. He was an immoral man. The birthright's coming down here. The birthright's all about leading the family and double inheritance. Why would he need a double inheritance? Because he has to lead the family. Leading the family is key. What in this particular family did have to be led? How about the worship had to be led? Was Esau a worshiper? No. What else would have had to be done? How about the covenant? The covenant would have to be seen to. Was Esau one to see to the covenant? He could care less about the covenant. He could care less about the spiritual things. He had contempt for his own birthright. We haven't gotten there yet, but he sells it for a pot of beans because he's hungry. He's been out in the field hunting. He comes back, he's hungry. I can relate to that. Yeah. He says he says in there, he says, I'm about to perish. Now, surely his mama would have given him some beans to eat or something to eat. Surely his family wouldn't let him die. He exaggerates. He cares more for his stomach than he does for the spiritual things in life. Before we look too harshly upon Esau, I don't know about you, but there are times when I look to my stomach, the physical needs, sometimes greater than the spiritual things in my life, and I go, ooh, ouch. That one hurts because I'm guilty. So we can be harsh all we want to Esau, but Esau is very much a picture of humanity, especially today. Especially today. Let's close. Brother Kenneth, would you close us in prayer?
Father, Lord,